Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Just talked with some quarterback decisions for teams that have quarterbacks eligible for extension. Now we are going to be talking about a little bit bigger picture here with some NFL contenders and what their biggest needs are in the offseason. Now, this is taking into consideration what free agents they have coming up, what they can address in overall free agency or the draft, as well as some of the progression, how we expect the players that are on their roster to be moving forward. So we are going to be starting with the AFC here and talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously looking for their three-peat, their 3 Super Bowls in a row. I think that they, as we've talked about on the show in the past, they have a good amount of guys specifically on their defense that are coming up on free agency that sort of plays into their needs. I think that the top 3 positions for them are wide receiver, linebacker, and defensive line. Wide receiver has obviously been a massive storyline surrounding the Chiefs for the past season or so, ever since the first game of the 2023-24 season with Kadarius Toney and all of that. And Rashee Rice developed very nicely over the course of the year. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, I mean, he made the big catch against the Ravens in the AFC Championship game that sealed it, but I still think that they would like to get some guys around Mahomes that are a little more reliable long-term for them. And you also have to keep in mind that Travis Kelce, he is only getting older from here after a tremendous workload over the course of his career, and especially during these past these past few playoff runs. So, as he continues to get older, I think that you need to add up on all of these other weapons. Obviously, it's easy to make a blanket statement that the Chiefs traded one of, if not the best wide receiver in the league in Tyreek Hill, and then they went on to win back-to-back Super Bowls, which is a true statement. But they also did happen to have the best tight end of his generation, at least top 2 all time, pretty much. I know there are other guys. Gronk is the other one I have in mind. There's the other historic tight ends, too, if you want to go down the list of guys, Jason Witten, Antonio Gates, all of them, Hines Ward, that did a little bit more blocking than Travis Kelce ever did. But if you also want to talk about just pure wide receiver as a threat, I think it's hard to argue for any of these historic tight ends over Travis Kelce. And that has been something that Patrick Mahomes has been able to lean on. And that is not always going to be the case for him going forward. So I like the promise that Rashee Rice showed for them in his rookie season, but you're going to need to add up on talent, I think, ideally in the draft, and get some of these cheap contracts, because if you look at the amount of needs that they're going to have on defense, specifically due to their free agency, they're losing their 2 top linebackers in Drew Tranquill and Willie Gay, L'Jarius Sneed. And when I say losing, I mean they're not going to be under contract next year, at least as of yet. So you're going to have to make decisions. You can't pay everybody. So it's Willie Gay, Drew Tranquill. In the secondary, you have L'Jarius Sneed. Front end, you have Chris Jones. And that's just a lot of guys that you have to shell out these contracts for. And you're not going to be able to keep all of them. I've talked about, I think Chris Jones should be a priority for them. If you can do anything you can to get L'Jarius Sneed to stay as well, you do so. That means you are going to have to probably run into next season with at least 1 or 2 new linebackers. And, I think that we can see a version of this Chiefs team as we have in the past be fueled by their offense. Last year, they just had the luxury to be able to lean on their defense so much to help them put together the run that they did. Now, Mahomes is more than capable enough to, have an offense-driven team win the Super Bowl. such as their Super Bowl against the Eagles just a couple years ago. So I think that receiver is the top target for them. And speaking of wide receiver needs, the next team I have here is the Baltimore Ravens, where I have their top needs as wide receiver, the defensive front line, and offensive linemen. Receiver, I talked about this on the show the other day with the Ravens, where Zay Flowers was a tremendous addition to their offense last year, which was great to see because Lamar has not had really a plethora of great receivers surrounding him through his career early here in Baltimore. But now you're also getting upcoming free agents in Odell Beckham Jr., Nelson Aguilar, and Devin Duvernay. I know Duvernay didn't play as much last year, but three guys that have been in the building for a while, and now, or not really that long, but you get what I mean. He was with them. They were with the Ravens for last season, and now three top options in, again, maybe a little bit underwhelming, and they've been more of a tight end based team, starting with Mark Andrews, but we saw the development of Isaiah Likely through the course of last season as well. I think that getting at least one other running mate on the perimeter alongside Zay Flowers would go a very long way for the Ravens. On that note, the offensive line, I think, is something that they need to address because they have been such a run-based team, and it's why Lamar and the Ravens have been able to have the success early that they have. And I think that when you look at this team as a whole, it doesn't really matter all too much who is lining up at running back for them. And maybe John Harbaugh and Monken felt differently, which is why they weren't throwing the ball, or weren't running the ball, I should say, against the Chiefs. But I kind of feel like it doesn't matter who's back there all that much. You have guys like J.K. Dobbins, who's always injured, granted, and you have Keaton Mitchell, who should come back next year healthy. Dobbins might be an expiring free agent. I can check on that. But Keaton Mitchell was phenomenal when they had him back there. Gus Edwards, Justice Hill have also been good contributors for them as well. I think that the key for them is making sure that the offensive line holds up. They have both of their starting guards from last year approaching free agency in John Simpson and Kevin Zeitler. Zeitler is getting up there in age, but he's coming off of debatably his best season of his career as well. Was selected to his first Pro Bowl this past year, and I would assume that their thought process is just to retain those two, but one way or another, whether it's them or other solid options, I think that making sure that offensive line holds up is the key. Now, I mentioned the defensive front line. It can be addressed by re-signing some of their free agents. Justin Madubuike is the big one for them, but you have others, including Jadeveon Clowney, who I don't really think will be back for the Ravens next year unless him, from his perspective and the type of career he's had, where he has bounced around a little bit and seemingly found a very comfortable role within that Ravens defense, maybe would want to stick around. But defensive coordinator Mike McDonald also just left for the Seahawks head coaching job, so we'll see with that. It's interesting here because they're a little handicapped in terms of salary cap flexibility, so I would expect them to tag Madubuike, let Clowney walk, and sort of do the rest of what they can through the draft, because it's also going to be a lot of emphasis trying to make sure that Patrick Queen comes back, their star linebacker, Geno Stone, their safety, coming off of a great season. I would imagine that they're going to want to re-sign him as well. So that's what I would consider their needs to be. Switching over to the NFC here a little bit. If we have time, we'll circle back around to the Bills, who receiver is obviously the big one for them as well. They have a lot of very interesting decisions to make because of the salary cap space that they're in, but as we're sort of running short on time here again, maybe coming back to that. But the San Francisco 49ers looking to come back with vengeance after falling just short in the Super Bowl. I've talked about it before. They are retaining the majority of their Super Bowl roster from this past season. So I think their biggest needs are offensive tackle, cornerback, and then from there, not really a glaring third need. I would say maybe linebacker. You could make the argument for front lineman, but Colton McKivitz, their right tackle, really struggled in my eyes during the postseason, and he's had a couple good regular seasons for them, so I'm not sure they would necessarily want to fully move off of him, but I think that they're going to need depth one way or another, because you also have Trent Williams on the other side, who has been tremendous. Has 3 straight All-Pro first-team selections, so it's not about replacing him necessarily, but he is going to be 36 next year, and he's really been struggling with health during the course of the past few seasons. So whether it's finding somebody to replace Colton McKivitz or even just having another person in the building where if McKivitz drops off, you can have him take over there or fill in for Trent Williams, who again has missed a lot of time over the past few seasons. And I'm sure that he would be somebody that would be very solid to learn under from. So I would say that cornerback, secondary was really the weakness of their defense last year. And really, when you look at their team as a whole, probably one of the biggest weaknesses, if not the biggest. But they are set to get their safety Talanoa Hufanga back from injury next year. I think that automatically raises the floor of their secondary. Ambry Thomas, I've talked about him on the show before, where he got a lot of snaps for them during their playoff run. He was sidelined for all but one in the Super Bowl. So you think that on the perimeter, getting some draft picks, I think could be very helpful. It's tough to solely rely on youth. They're another team. It's not like they have tons of flexibility in terms of salary cap, but if they could maybe go out and get somebody, maybe a veteran, a little bit on the cheaper side, Stephon Gilmore, maybe he's going to be asking for more money. And it's not that he's, the lockdown version that he was when he was Defensive Player of the Year, but I think that he can still maybe potentially be looking for a little bit of, just not ring chasing necessarily, but trying to get back out there. I know that he already has one as it is, but, we'll see with that. You would hope that Jair Brown can take a step in his second season, which would be a very positive sign for them, especially with Tayshaun Gibson probably seeing his way out of San Francisco during this offseason. I included linebacker as this third need for them just because their roster is very complete, but they are going to be without Dre Greenlaw for likely a lot of next season. Obviously tore his Achilles in the Super Bowl on that really tragic, really unfair, situation while he was running back onto the field off of the sidelines. Oren Burks really struggled in his absence when he was filling in, and granted, this was being thrown into the situation spontaneously for him, but Burks is also going to be a free agent anyways, so I'm not sure the Niners are really going to have him as a top priority guy for them as it is. Like I mentioned, frontline depth is something that could be addressed just based off of the number of names that are headed to free agency, but it's not like they were heavy playing time guys with them. Yes, you have Chase Young, but I've mentioned can get a compensatory pick for him in return. Sebastian Joseph Day is the other big name there, but Randy Gregory, Javon Kinlaw, Clennon Farrell, and others are also all upcoming free agents, and you imagine they're not going to be able to re-sign all of them, but they have their main 3 guys as it is in Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, and Javon Hargrave, I think, that are going to be holding it down for them in the middle as it is, so shouldn't be too worried. I was thinking of the Hargrave too, that I think Vernon Hargrave, I got confused with him, the corner that was in the draft a handful of years ago. That was a tough moment for me right there. Thanks for sticking with me. But yeah, I think the Niners as a whole, as we've talked about before, have a lot of their roster coming back, so it's not like they have any super glaring needs. The Dallas Cowboys, I think their biggest needs are linebacker, their secondary, really generally, and their offensive line. they have the names of Leighton Vander Esch and Micah Parsons on that, linebacking core for them, but Vander Esch has been really struggling with injuries since his All-Pro rookie season. He's played one full year since then, which was in 2018-19, and Parsons is obviously great, but I think that elsewhere, he takes on such a massive role in terms of rushing the passer. He needs some help there in terms of run support. They were a great passing defense during the regular season, but definitely got taken advantage of somewhat in the run. They were middle of the pack during the regular season. And then for the secondary purposes, that was sort of where things came apart for them. I know that Aaron Jones had a big game for the Packers when they played the Cowboys as well, but just really soft in the secondary. That's where Gilmore really started to show his age a little bit. I know I just mentioned him with the last one with the 49ers about potentially being somebody that could fill the role. But all in all here, I think that we can expect them to go for guys in the secondary with Stephon Gilmore, Jaron Kearse, and Jordan Lewis, all upcoming free agents. They have Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland in that secondary as well. So it's not like they are hopeless without these guys, but I think that they could definitely help. They could definitely seek help in that secondary. And then offensive line, Tyler Biotish and Tyron Smith are going to be free agents for them. Smith has obviously been a staple for the Cowboys for the longest time since, they had these extremely dominant offensive lines, and he's still been great. He was All-Pro second team last year as well, but only played 13 games, hasn't played in a full season since 2015. So just based off of age and injury history, I think that adding to that offensive line, bringing back Biotish is a huge thing. What they want to do at tackle specifically, I think it's Terrence Steele on the other end has sort of been up and down as well. So could definitely add some reinforcements on that offensive line as well. That is all we have time for this segment. Sure, we will get more into sort of what these teams are doing as the offseason progresses, but for now we're going to be taking another break, and when we come back on the other side, we will be talking about the college football format that was just announced for the playoffs. So stick with us. We will be right back.